Do you think for Jaylen Brown as well too, just the mental side of the Celtics having committed to him? Because he had to play this whole season with this contract thing lingering over him. It was really up for debate. Like a lot of like even us, we were talking about what the best way to approach this going forward was, fake trades, just all of that stuff. But they've locked him down. He is said he's invested in the city as well too. He wants to commit to growing the economy in the area. So just the is there going to be like a peace of mind now for Jaylen Brown that's going to elevate his game? Because Logan Murdoch as well too on the Ringer after he signed the contract. Logan Murdoch had written a feature about Jaylen Brown, and they were rerunning it again because of the contract extension. And in that piece, he talked about a practice that Jaylen Brown went to, and something had happened in the class. There was a discussion he had with the professor that was really just weighing on him, and it affected his performance in the practice. So, I'm just that was in that piece, and he had to play this whole season with that thing lingering over him. But now he's the first $300 million player. He has fully guaranteed as well too. So they've committed to him. There's a trade kicker that makes it more difficult for him to leave. So that ups the chances for him just being there as well too. Is he the kind of guy that just needed that kind of backing to really kind of just take his game to that last step?
I think so. Yes. I mean, there was definitely some enmity or some unsettledness between him and the team when he was getting thrown into the KD trade talks. It seemed like he was always on the trading block. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for people who like me who had some questions about his play. And there seemed like there were some issues between him and Boston. He definitely felt uncomfortable being there at some points and times. And it seems like now he's committed to reinvesting in the black community in that area. Improving the area instead of leaving it. And he's someone who practices what he preaches. He's involved with the Players Association. He's involved with several foundations there as well. Huge. So I mean, huge off the court. Involved with events. He was in Paris for the Fashion Week, which is partially why they're. And then there was the Players Association meeting, and partially why the contract talks got delayed a bit. So when you look at all this, you can tell he's definitely someone who is very involved with activities and stuff outside of basketball. He's definitely got a balance between the two. It's not all basketball.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you have something, it's clear that he's aware and is a thinker, and it's something that affects his game, like you've mentioned. And so there is definitely that pressure mounting of Kane, does he deserve this deal? And there's questions of, oh, will they bring him back? And so that probably build up during their in their 7 game series, which they had multiple times to bail them out to beat the 76ers and almost beat the Heat. And so it's definitely a plays. I mean, they're still human beings. I think a lot, that is something that gets forgotten in a lot of things is, while they are professionals and, more athletically coordinated than anyone we've ever seen, in terms of NBA
Yeah.
players and professional players as a whole, they're still human beings and they still have thoughts and feelings and, emotions. And so that definitely played a play, and having this lockdown, having the contract, having the confidence, like you mentioned, and them really putting their stamp on this is our guy and this is it. I think that really is going to help them in future times, and really gives them that extra confidence to be a leader, to step up, and maybe removing Marcus Smart was also part of that. Hoping to get more vocal
Mm-hmm.
leadership from the other guys, to really own this team's run, really own this team's destiny, and to have them really take that next step, because it's clear that they have the talent there. It's very clear that they have the talent to make the deep runs. They've consistently showed that, and they just need that one final really push to get over that hill, which was very clear when you saw them against the Warriors in the finals. It was just they weren't quite there, and so hopefully this is what the move that they needed. And they are continuing to improve as a whole anyway, in terms of talent, in terms of understanding the game and their skills. So it's you know, it's very clear what his one weakness is, so we know he is definitely working on that. And if you know if they can improve this next year, they're going to be you know probably the toughest team in the East for sure.
Mm.
Like we mentioned, Chris Middleton, definitely getting older and after coming off an injury, definitely didn't look great this last year. And Giannis is banged up himself. We like we mentioned last podcast, we don't even know if he's playing international basketball because he's getting a surgery. And then 76ers, that you know their second star and James Harden is trying to get out of there. And you know the Heat, can they really repeat this? You know, will they? It doesn't seem likely that they're getting Dame. So and they've lost you know quite a few pieces on their roster as well. In Strus and Gabe Vincent, I think they both left.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so so you know a lot of around the East and you know the league in general. The West is starting to load up, but especially in the East, there's not really a set juggernaut outside of Boston, and so it makes sense that they reloaded, locked back in, and even with losing Williams and Smart, bringing in Porzingis should help offset some of those losses. And it's going to be exciting to see if this team can really take that step because their worst enemy has been themselves. They've been the ones to drag themselves down. I don't, you know, watching their games, it's not. I don't think there's been a team that's really out talented them, like where it was like wild. You know, there was even with that Nets series where they got beaten pretty handedly. You know, it's still clear that they were kind of in their own way, and then they came back and swept that team. So it's definitely they have the talent, and it's just more on the mental side, which has been affecting not only Jaylen Brown but the whole team. So hopefully this allows them to really take that next step, allow Tatum and Brown to really step up and be leaders this next year because that's what they need. I mean, that's what they've been missing.
That is the last step that these guys need to take in their development is and this is not just Jaylen Brown either. We've talked about this for Jason Tatum as well too, that one of the things that makes Tatum so special is his ability to go out and just play so well regardless of kind of how the game was going. Like Jason Tatum never really dictates the pace of the game. He just hits shots. He's a massive scorer, a bucket getter. Like Jaylen Brown has developed into the same sort of thing. And yeah, maybe that does have its big picture questions. That is the one, the one thing that Udoka seemed like he was tapping into was smoothing that out. And now Missoula is going to have to figure out how to do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's like the last step that those guys. I mean, Brown is obviously, a level and a half behind where Jason Tatum is at. But being the like controlling the game and kind of just having their style. When they were a defensive team, they had an identity. They could slow the game down. They were locked in on that end. They had something that they could fall back on. And this season, the one thing that they could fall back on was just Jason Tatum was awesome and seemed like he's now really just in that realm of superstar. So yeah, that's what we talked about too, though, for these guys getting that contract a little younger. Like if Jaylen Brown is doing this year 10, you're looking at him going, well, what's the upside of this guy year 10 getting that deal with the skill set he's shown? But year 7, like these are the prime years of his career now. So these guys are still having these formative experiences and figuring this stuff out. And not to put like other players on blast either, but Jaylen Brown is like a big picture thinker, and you can in one of that came off in that piece that Logan Murdoch did as well, which is a great piece. If you can't tell already, I've talked a bunch about it. Go read that piece if you haven't. And that comes off in that piece. It comes off in his interviews. He has a respected status around the league, and you just see like other players doing their player podcast circuit, going around doing the interviews. Like Jaylen Brown is thinking about the bigger picture stuff, and I'm sure it has its moments on his mentality. There's no way it just doesn't affect him. Like that's a lot of stuff that weighs on him. He definitely takes a lot of responsibility in the position that he has, and a lot of responsibility now with the wealth that he has. And one of the things that was really impressive with this is because the numbers for the contract are big. Like 70 million is big compared to now, but like we've said, it's only 35% of the cap. So it's just a projection of what 35% of the cap would be. And in the lost tapes, we were talking about when the possibility of the next $400 million player would be. And I did find this piece on CBS. Let's see who it's by.
Oh,
It's by Sam Quinn. This was so we're recording this on the 29th. UFC 291 is about to start any minute now. Uh this piece came out on the 26th. He lays it out, does all the math,
yeah,
says that we should have a $400 million a year player by the 27-28 season, I believe. Let me scroll back down and
yeah.
make sure
That's
that's right.
that's
Yeah,
five
that's
years.
yep. And
What they're
then the
projecting.
first year of that contract would be around 69 million. So with 8% raises each year, that puts you at 92 million the last year of that contract. That averages out to 80 million a year. So that's like what, like 4 or 5 years from now? I mean, we're almost there. That's crazy.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, and in that last pod,
The
when you
last.
look at the numbers of the new TV deal that the league is looking for, I think it was mentioning that the national TV revenue will jump up from 2.6 per year to like 8.5. Just because they'll be getting it's a $75 billion deal instead of 25 billion, so 3 times as much for this next deal. And like we mentioned, like with sports now into coming into this next kind of decade, it's clear that sports is the only consistent live thing that people will come and watch for. It's the only thing that you can set a certain time and people are going to turn on the TV for. And especially with streaming platforms, a lot of people, similar to me, you can just watch it later. You can watch it on demand.
Mhm.
Why do I need to come back and watch it? But sports, it's still an event. It's still something people come all together for. We saw this with the World Cup. We've seen this with other events. And so just having that dependability is something that these media companies, especially TV companies that are kind of scrambling to keep viewers, is something that is worth its weight in diamonds and what gold and the most valuable in rubies, because it's just so hard to find content like that already without this writer strike, without all the
Mhm.
strike, which was crazy. Wish these media companies could pay people, but they're
Yeah.
feeling the effects of it now. Think projects are getting delayed. We can see some lack of quality in writing projects. I don't know if you watched Secret Invasion, but it kind
No,
of
I
had a
didn't.
really rough ending. A lot of people didn't like it, and
Mhm.
it wasn't great, but you can see the kind of the lack of shows and content out there for those streaming sites. And so now not only do you have the lack of content for live TV and not really an audience for it as much, then you also don't have as much as stuff on the streaming sites. Not really much is coming out. So people are going to have to be entertained somewhere, and that's
Mhm.
kind of what soccer has started to understand, and we'll talk a little bit about it later in the corner. Is they're coming overseas, they're coming to U.S., they're starting to take the opportunity, and people can see them. And we'll go home and go and watch them, or you can watch them on TV. They're starting their season earlier. There's more soccer online, and then there's U.S. or there's a Women's World Cup and other sports. So it's just there's so much value in sports. And with the league getting the new CBA, kind of locking in their agreement with the players, they can start really expanding. They've already pretty much 100% confirmed that Las Vegas and Seattle will have the new expansion teams, which I'm really happy that Seattle will get a team. They definitely deserve to have one.
Mhm.
And so now they'll be able to offer even more games, more teams, if they're able to figure that out before the TV deal ends in I think 2 years. Um, and now with the midseason tournament, they're kind of now a little bit competing with NFL, but making sure they're not on NFL days, but still having that, kind of during their season, kind of fitting into their own slot. And so it'll be interesting to see. I'm really excited to see the future of the NBA, and they're exploding. They've kind of had the cap smoothing where they're making sure that everyone in the league benefits and not just the players whose contract it was up that year.
Yeah.
But they're still looking for the cap to expand 15 million each year. So that's still a significant amount. I mean, that's a solid. I mean, 15 million a year player is still a solid, mid-range guy. So I'm really excited to see how the league continues to grow, and them willing to try out new ideas, new things, and especially with this midseason tournament, it's going to be really fun once that gets rolling. And I think some people are like kind of on the fence about it. Once it's in person or once it's happening and you see the bracket and crazy stuff happens, it's really going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, the more we've talked about it and the more it sits, like I am starting to get hyped about it. And I think, like you're saying, because we're seeing now with this writer strike too, just the stuff in the fall is already starting to be pulled back. So if we're already seeing the effects of it now, like there's really not going to be any new stuff coming out at the end of the year. So people are going to be hungry for something. NFL is going to be in the air, but the tournament games are not on NFL days. So if they can just kind of catch that wave of sports energy and the vibe is just in the air, it's going to benefit everybody. And if you like, just think about too, like what these strikes in Hollywood are about and what they're arguing over. Like it's about the origin of the content. The writers are the origin of content, the AI, they're trying to bring that in. It's just it's about where it all stems from. And there is the streaming service stuff too involved. But
Yeah.
just like fundamentally what sports is, I mean, like it's just you can't really script it, like honestly. Like, it's always creating itself. There's always new, there's always different stuff happening. Like you can't make it like a TV show. It's always going to be churning at this point. Like it doesn't seem like it's gonna stop. And the NBA as well too is going to really benefit from that.
I
It
did want to mention, yeah, with the writers as well. It's definitely, with them protesting. Some of the issues is also with those residual payments
Yeah.
where they, how many times those things their content is being aired compared to streaming and things along those lines. And with sports, you don't have to worry about that. Once you film it, for that game, they don't have to show it. They don't have to pay those guys ever again for that specific game. Now they're
That's
getting
true.
paid a whole lot more than the writers are, but
Don't give them ideas, Sam.
yeah, I know, but but
IT, bleep that out.
they can put on anytime NBA TV or whatever they can put on 1998 the finals or whatever, and they don't have to worry about paying anyone. So that's another reason these media companies love sports. So it's the value of sports is skyrocketing right now, and it's going to be a really tough product to ignore for these media companies. And it's one of the major sports here in America. Even if football is king, there are other options.